Migrations. What are they, and why should you use them? In this video, you'll get answers to these questions. When building an application, you usually need a database to store data. This requires a database schema with specific tables and columns. Migrations are designed to define this schema directly within your application. They work like version control for your database and offer many advantages. With migrations, everything is centralized, making it easy to share with your teammates. No need to export a database schema as SQL to share it. Plus, it's simple to recreate the database schema on a production server exactly as it is in your development environment. When using migrations, you don't need and shouldn't change any database schema directly through a database admin panel. If you want to rebuild the database or roll back previous changes to the schema, you only need to use one command. It's really simple. Now let's use migrations in a Laravel application. Migrations are stored in the database migrations directory. As you can see, this directory isn't empty. A default Laravel application includes a few migrations for users, sessions, etc. There are several ways to create a new migration, but the best way is to use the command php artisan make migration create table name. The migration name should include the action and table name. After using the command, a new file should appear in the directory. The first part of the file name contains a number, which is a timestamp automatically added by Laravel to maintain the correct order of files. This order is important because it affects the sequence in which queries are executed. For example, one migration might create a new table, and another might modify a column name, so the table creation needs to happen first. Now, let's create a migration to add a new table to the database. I'll create a table for articles, which will include columns like article title, description, content, etc. Open the terminal and type the command php artisan make migration create articles table. As you can see, a new file has been created. Open this file, and by default, you'll find two methods defined, up and down. The up method is executed when you run migrations. In the schema create method, we need to define the table name and the operations to be executed. In this case, we'll create specific columns with specific types using methods provided by Laravel. Let me explain a few of them. This creates an ID column as an unsigned big integer, sets it as the primary key, and enables auto increment. Increments work similarly to ID, but you need to specify the column name as a parameter, and it uses an unsigned integer instead of a big integer. This is useful if you don't need the range of a big integer, as it can reduce database size. Timestamps. This method creates created at and updated at columns. Created at is filled with the current timestamp when a new row is created, and updated at is updated with each row update. Foreign, used to create a foreign key constraint to enforce referential integrity at the database level. You can set actions for deletions, such as set null, cascade, etc. Enum, used to create a column with predefined valid values. Of course, you can create the most common data types like int, float, or string, often using methods named after these types, with many variations such as unsigned, small, tiny, big, etc. For the full list, refer to the documentation. For my example with the articles table, I will keep the ID and timestamps as they are by default, and I'll add columns for a title of type string with a maximum length of 100, a description that may be nullable, content as a string, and a Boolean is published with a default value of false. You can easily create many migrations like this for the complete database schema used in your project. Changes to the database are made when you run the command php artisan migrate. In the console, you can see the statuses of migrations and any errors that may be thrown. In the down method, you can define what should happen when you roll back a migration. But why would you need to roll back? Let's say you created a table and then realized that you forgot to include a column. During the development process, it's usually easier to roll back that migration, add the necessary column, and migrate it again. In a migration like my example, it usually involves dropping the table. But if your migration edits a column name, you can specify the original name before the change. Each rollback should effectively revert your schema to its state before running that migration. To roll back a migration, use the command php artisan migrate rollback. By default, this will roll back the last batch of migrations. For example, if you created 3 tables and ran the migrations after each created file, using this command will roll back 1 table for you, unless you specify the step or batch parameter. By adding these parameters to the command, you can specify the number of batches or a specific number of migrations to roll back using step. You can also roll back all your migrations using the command php artisan migrate reset, or you can roll back and migrate again using php artisan migrate refresh. This is very useful when you want to check if your down methods work as expected. There is one more useful command, php artisan migrate fresh, which will drop all tables and then execute the migrations again. This raises the question, why do we need to create edit migrations, as mentioned earlier, for individual commands if we can just refresh the migrations? This is very important for production purposes. Let's say you build an application, run it on a server, and users are using it. Your tables are filled with data. If you need to change something, such as adding one more column to a specific table, you probably don't want to lose the existing data. Instead, you would just add the column and set it to null, for example, for the existing records. On a production server, you typically should not refresh any migrations. Instead, use php artisan migrate, which will apply all the necessary changes. Now I'll show you an example of editing migration. I'll create a migration named add user ID to articles. As you can see, the default structure of this file is created, and the table name is automatically filled in by Laravel based on the provided migration name. You can change the table name if you want, or you can add the table parameter when creating the migration to specify which table should be used. I will now add a foreign key column for the user who created the article. I'll set the onDelete option to set null, which means this column needs to be nullable as well. To position this column in a specific place, you can use the after method, which allows you to specify the location for the new column. Next, let's complete the down method. In this case, it should remove the user ID column, which we can achieve using the drop column method. To test if everything works correctly, I will use php artisan migrate and then roll back the migration. As you can see, the column is added after the migration and removed after the rollback. That's everything you need to know about the main migration rules. Start using them, and you'll quickly notice their importance.